I'm Ethan Carter, and I need to tell you about the night that changed everything. It was a warm October evening in San Diego, and the ocean breeze was carrying the scent of jasmine through the windows of my parents' house in La Jolla. The same house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd spent countless hours helping my dad with his weekend projects. But that night, it became the place where I realized I was invisible in my own family. To keep hearing this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. We were all gathered around the dining room table, the one my mom had bought at that antique shop in Hillcrest years ago, to celebrate my younger brother Jake's new startup. The chandelier cast a warm glow over the spread of food my mother had prepared, her famous carne asada, fresh tortillas, and that salsa verde that always made my eyes water. Everyone was laughing, talking over each other, passing dishes around. My dad was in his element, telling stories about his own business ventures from the 80s, gesturing with his wine glass like he was conducting an orchestra. Jake, 26 and fresh out of UC San Diego with his computer science degree, was beaming as he explained his app concept for the third time that evening. Something about connecting local artists with buyers. I'll be honest, I'd tuned out after the first explanation. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I'd heard this exact pitch 6 months ago when I'd helped him write the business plan. I sat there quietly, cutting my steak into small pieces, listening to the familiar rhythm of my family's conversation. My mom was asking Jake about his timeline. My dad was already planning the IPO, and my sister Maria was taking photos for her Instagram story. I was just there, present but not really part of it. That's when Jake mentioned needing to hire a financial advisor. I want to make sure I'm making smart decisions with the investment money, he said, wiping his mouth with his napkin. Maybe someone who understands both the tech side and the business side. I looked up from my plate. For the past 8 years, I'd been working as a senior financial analyst at a major firm downtown. I'd helped dozens of startups structure their finances, avoid common pitfalls, and plan for sustainable growth. I'd literally written articles about it for industry publication. But instead of acknowledging my expertise, my dad immediately started rattling off names of his golf buddies who knew about money. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I've been working with startups for years. I could help Jake set up proper financial controls, maybe create some projections that would help with future funding rounds. The table went quiet for a moment. My mom smiled at me, that polite smile she used when she didn't want to hurt feelings, but also didn't want to commit to anything. Jake nodded absently, but I could see he was already mentally moving on to the next topic. That's sweet of you, Ethan, my dad said, and I felt my stomach tighten at the condescending tone. But Jake needs someone with real startup experience, someone who understands the unique challenges of a tech business. I do understand, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I've worked with companies just like this. I know the regulatory requirements, the tax implications, the cash flow challenge. I could save him thousands in consulting fees. My sister Maria looked up from her phone. Dad's right though. Jake needs someone who really gets the tech world. No offense, Ethan, but your firm mostly works with traditional businesses, right? I felt heat rising in my cheek. No offense taken, I lied. I'm just saying that financial responsibility is financial responsibility. Whether it's tech or retail or manufacturing, the fundamentals don't change. That's when my dad set down his wine glass and looked at me with that expression I'd seen countless times growing up. The one that said he was about to deliver what he considered wisdom, but what always felt like a judgment. Ethan, he said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he used in his board meetings. You're just jealous of your brother. The words hung in the air like smoke from a campfire, stinging my eyes and making it hard to breathe. Around the table I heard my mom's sharp intake of breath, saw Maria's eyes widen, watched Jake shift uncomfortably in his chair. But then, and this is what I'll never forget, my dad smiled. Not a warm, understanding smile, but that cold, dismissive smile he used when he thought he'd won an argument. I mean, come on, he continued, warming to his theme. Jake's 26 and he's already starting his own company. At 26, you were still figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. It's natural to feel a little envious. The worst part wasn't just the words, it was the laughter that followed. My sister snorted, trying to hide it behind her napkin. My mom made a soft, oh honey sound, but she was smiling too. Even Jake, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, Couldn't quite suppress a grin. I felt something cold settle in my chest, like ice water replacing my blood. Not anger exactly, but something deep, a kind of clarity that comes when you finally see something that's been hidden in plain sight for years. Jealous, I repeated, tasting the word like it was something bitter. You think I'm jealous? My dad shrugged, already reaching for the wine bottle to refill his glass. It's understandable. Jake's always been the ambitious one, the risk taker. You're more steady, nothing wrong with that. I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them. My mom, who'd spent 30 years managing Dad's ego and smoothing over his harsh words. My sister, who'd learned to deflect attention from herself by joining in when Dad targeted someone else. My brother, who'd grown up believing he was special because everyone told him so, not because he'd actually earned it. And then I looked at my dad, 62 years old, silver-haired, successful in his own mind. The man who'd taught me to throw a baseball, who'd helped me with my math homework, who'd driven me to soccer practice every Saturday morning for 6 years. The man who'd also spent my entire life comparing me to other people's children, finding me lacking, making it clear that I was the disappointment. You want to know what I'm jealous of? I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I'm jealous of Jake's confidence. Not because he's starting a company. Hell, I could start a company tomorrow if I wanted to. I'm jealous because he grew up believing he could do anything, while I grew up believing I'd never be good enough. The table went silent again, but this time it was different. This time, they were listening. I'm jealous because when Jake needed help with his business plan, you all assumed I'd be happy to work for free, to use my expertise to help him succeed. But when I offered to continue helping, suddenly my expertise wasn't good enough. I'm jealous because Jake gets to be the golden child who takes risks and gets celebrated, while I'm the responsible one who gets called boring. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. But you know what I'm not jealous of? I'm not jealous of being handed everything. I'm not jealous of never having to prove myself. And I'm not jealous of having a family that thinks love is conditional on achievement. I walked to the front door, my family's voices rising behind me. My mom was calling my name, asking me to come back, to not leave like this. Jake was saying something about not meaning to cause problems. Maria was telling everyone to calm down. But my dad's voice cut through all of them. Ethan, don't be so dramatic. We're just having a conversation. I turned back from the doorway, looking at him one last time. No, Dad, you were just having a conversation. I was being humiliated by people who are supposed to love me. I drove home to my apartment in downtown San Diego, the city lights blurring through my windshield. I wasn't crying. I was too numb for. I was thinking about all the times I'd excused their behavior. All the times I'd told myself that this was just how families were, that everyone had their roles to play. I thought about my college graduation, where Dad had spent the whole dinner talking about Jake's high school achievement. I thought about my promotion to senior analyst, which had earned me a "That's nice, honey" from Mom, and a lecture from Dad about how I should be thinking bigger. I thought about the woman I'd been dating for 2 years, Sarah, who'd stopped coming to family dinners because she couldn't stand watching how they treated me. They don't even see you, she'd said after the last dinner she'd attended. It's like you're a ghost in your own family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what my dad had said, about Jake being the risk taker while I was just steady. It was funny because 6 months earlier, when Jake had needed $50,000 to get his startup off the ground, guess who'd been steady enough to help? My grandmother had left me a small inheritance when she died 2 years ago. Not a fortune, but enough to make a difference. When Jake came to me with his business plan, nervous and excited and desperate for someone to believe in him, I'd offered to invest. Not as a loan, but as a gift. Family supporting family, the way it should be. I'd never told my parents about the inheritance. Grandma Rose had specifically left it to me, along with a note that said she'd always admired my responsibility and kindness. Use this to build something beautiful, she'd written in her careful cursive. You deserve good things, Ethan. So when Jake needed help, I'd given him the money. I'd helped him write his business plan. I'd introduced him to contacts in my professional network. I'd spent weekends helping him prepare for investor meetings. And through it all, my parents had praised his entrepreneurial spirit, his vision, his courage. But when I'd offered to continue helping with the financial side, suddenly I wasn't qualified. I was just jealous. I sat at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning, staring at my laptop screen. In front of me was Jake's business registration, listing me as a co-founder and initial investor. My $50,000 had been the seed money that made everything else possible. But at dinner, when my dad was talking about Jake's amazing startup, there was no mention of my contribution. I wasn't looking for credit. I didn't need my name on the company website or a thank you speech. But I also didn't deserve to be called jealous when I'd literally made the whole thing possible. Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. My mom called 6 times the first day, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. "Honey, please call me back. Your father didn't mean it the way it sounded. We're family, we need to talk about this." Maria texted me a dozen times. Mostly variations of dad's being stubborn but mom's worried sick, and just apologize so we can move past this. Even Jake called, his voice tight with guilt and frustration. "Ethan, man, I'm sorry about what happened at dinner. Dad was out of line. But you know how he gets when he's been drinking. He doesn't mean half the stuff he says." I listened to all of them, but I kept coming back to the same question. If my dad didn't mean it, why did it feel so true? Why did it perfectly capture the dynamic that had defined my entire relationship with my family? I made a decision that Friday morning. I called my lawyer, the same one who'd helped me with Grandma's estate, and asked him to draw up papers removing me from Jake's company. I wanted my name off everything. My investment converted to a loan with standard terms. My involvement officially ended. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "From what you've told me, the company has real potential. This could be worth significant money down the road." "I'm sure," I said. "I don't want to be a part of something where my contribution isn't valued." Then I called my bank and closed the joint account my parents had insisted on opening when I'd started my first job. "For emergencies," they'd said. "Family looks out for family." The account had been mostly symbolic. I'd never used it, and they'd never needed to, but it was a connection I no longer wanted. The hardest part was the silence. Not the silence from my family, though that was difficult too, but the silence in my own head. For 30 years, I'd been hearing their voices, their expectations, their judgments. I'd been making decisions based on what they would think, how they would react, whether they would approve. Now, suddenly, I was alone with my own thoughts, and it was terrifying. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late at the office. My colleagues noticed the change. "You seem different," my boss, Patricia, said during our monthly one-on-one. "More focused, more confident in your recommendations." She was right. Without the constant background noise of family disapproval, I found myself speaking up more in meetings, proposing innovative solutions, taking calculated risks. The promotion I'd been hoping for came through 6 weeks later, along with a significant raise and the opportunity to lead my own team. "You've really stepped up," Patricia said when she offered me the position. "I don't know what's changed, but keep doing whatever you're doing." Sarah noticed too. We'd been taking things slow, partly because I'd been so focused on managing family dynamics that I'd never had the emotional energy to fully commit to our relationship. But now, with that weight lifted, I found myself more present, more engaged, more willing to be vulnerable. "It's like you've been holding your breath for years," she said one evening as we walked along the beach in Mission Bay. "And now you're finally exhaling." 3 months after the dinner, Jake's startup got featured in a local business magazine. I saw the article because one of my coworkers forwarded it to me, along with a note that said, "Isn't this your brother's company? You must be so proud." The article was full of praise for Jake's vision and determination. It mentioned the initial family investment that got the company off the ground, but it didn't mention my name. In the photo, Jake was standing in front of a modern office space, looking confident and successful. I felt nothing. Not pride, not anger, not regret, just a quiet satisfaction that I'd made the right choice. That same week, I got a call from my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister. "Ethan, honey, I heard about what happened with your family. I just wanted you to know that I think you're handling this with incredible grace." I was surprised. I hadn't talked to any extended family about the situation, and I'd assumed they'd hear only my parents' version of events. "Your mom called me crying," Linda continued. "She said you'd had a fight and weren't speaking to them anymore. But when I pressed her for details, the story she told me, well, let's just say it didn't make your dad look very good." She paused, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "You know, Ethan, I've watched your family dynamics for years. I've seen how they treat you compared to Jake and Marie. I've wanted to say something so many times, but it's not my place. but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. A year later, I was promoted again, this time to Vice President of Strategic Planning. Sarah and I moved in together, to a beautiful condo in Balboa Park, with a view of the city skyline. We adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Charlie, who had no agenda other than unconditional love. I learned to fill the silence with better voices, friends who appreciated my dry humor, colleagues who respected my expertise, a girlfriend who loved me for who I was rather than who I might become. I joined a hiking group, started taking cooking classes, began writing a book about financial planning for young professionals. One evening, as I was grilling fish tacos on our balcony, Sarah brought up the subject I'd been avoiding. Do you ever think about reaching out to them? I'm not saying you should. I just wonder if you miss them. I considered the question seriously. Did I miss them? I missed the idea of them, the family I'd wished we could be. I missed the comfort of belonging somewhere, even if that belonging came with conditions. But I didn't miss the constant feeling of inadequacy, the walking on eggshells, the knowledge that my worth was always being measured against someone else's achievements. I miss who I thought they were, I said finally, but I don't miss who they actually are. 2 weeks later, I got a LinkedIn message from Jake. His startup had been acquired by a larger tech company, and he was moving to Seattle for a senior position with the acquiring firm. The message was brief and formal. Thought you should know. Thanks for the early support. Hope you're doing well. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about all the things I could say. I could congratulate him on his success. I could ask about his new role. I could try to rebuild the bridge between us. Instead, I closed the message without responding, not out of anger, but out of a deep certainty that some chapters of our lives are meant to end. That night, I called my lawyer and asked him to draft a letter to Jake's company, officially forgiving the loan I'd made to his startup. I didn't want any connection to his success. I wanted to close that chapter completely, cleanly, with no lingering obligations on either side. 3 years have passed since that dinner in La Jolla. I've built a life that's entirely my own, filled with people who see me clearly and love me anyway. I've learned that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice, about finding your tribe among people who appreciate your worth. My dad was wrong about one thing. I wasn't jealous of Jake. I was jealous of the love and acceptance I thought I deserved, but never received. But here's what I've learned. You can't make people love you the way you need to be loved. You can only love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't. I still drive past my parents' house sometimes, when I'm heading to the beach or meeting friends in La Jolla. The jasmine still blooms in their front yard, and the same cars are still parked in the driveway. But it doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a place I used to know, a story I used to tell myself about who I was supposed to be. The real story, the one I'm living now, is so much better.